My first brush with death began in the belly of an igloo. I was 4 years old, tucked into a snow mound by the road, when the sharp mechanical whine of a snowmobile sliced through the winter air. I watched it zip through our yard and vanish into the tree line. Driven by that reckless, unrefined curiosity of childhood, I crawled out and gave chase. Where is he going? I wondered, my small boots finding the deep, ribbed grooves of the tracks. I followed that trail as it wound deeper into the woods, the shadows stretching long and thin as the sun began to dip. Eventually, the trees gave way to a massive field. It was a chaotic canvas of tracks, a crossroads where dozens of machines had played and then vanished. My curiosity was finally satiated, but the moment I turned to head back, the world felt like it had shifted on its axis. Standing at the edge of that vast, empty field, the silence suddenly felt heavy, suffocating even. The sun had slipped behind the horizon, leaving only a bruised purple twilight that offered no warmth. I looked back at the single line of tracks leading into the black maw of the woods, and for the first time in my short life, I understood the scale of the world. The distance didn't just look long, it looked impossible. The wind picked up, a low whistle through the trees that seemed to mock my thin jacket. It had been well below freezing even while the sun was up. But as the light vanished, the temperature began a sharp, terminal dive. I was a tiny 4-year-old speck in an ocean of white, and the realization hit me with a physical weight. I was a long way from home. The light was gone, and the air was rapidly turning brittle. The thermometer was already racing toward zero, and the cold was no longer just a sensation. It was a predator. The woods that had been a mystery to solve 10 minutes ago were now a gauntlet of ice and shadow. With a heavy heart and legs that already felt drained, I took that first lonely step into the dark. Tears pricked my eyes, but as they rolled down my face, they turned to ice, stinging my cheeks like frozen needles. The exhaustion was becoming heavier than the cold. I remember looking at the hollows at the base of the massive skeletal trees and thinking how warm they looked. I wanted so badly to crawl into the roots, curl into a ball, and just let the shivering stop. Even at 4, a primal instinct flared up inside me. I knew with terrifying certainty that if I sat down, I would never get back up. The snow would become my blanket, and I would simply disappear. I forced my mind away from the false promise of warmth and focused on marching. A strange mantra took hold of my toddler brain. Quitting is not an option. The movement was grueling. My legs had gone so numb and stiff that the act of walking became a mechanical torture. Every time my feet struck the hard-packed snow, a jolt of sharp electric pain shot upward, as if I were stepping directly onto iron spikes with every stride. I marched through the dark, each step a fresh needle of agony radiating through my frozen limbs. The forest at night is never truly dark when there is snow. The ground glowed with a ghostly, pale blue light that guided me through the skeletal trees, even as I became convinced I would never see my bedroom again. When I finally reached the front door, I was half delirious and shivering with a violence that shook my very bones. I reached for the handle, but the door was locked tight against the bitter New England night. In a panic, I tried to knock, but the tiny impact sent a bolt of excruciating pain shooting up my forearm, as if my bones were made of glass shattering from the inside. Realizing my hands were useless, I turned to the only strength I had left. I began to drive my boot into the wood, kicking the door with everything I had in hopes that someone, anyone, would hear me. When the door finally swung open, my mother looked down to find her youngest son staring up through a mask of ice and frozen tears. She thought I was tucked safely in bed. She swept me up and rushed me to the bathtub, her voice a blur of panic and comfort. I remember the water. It was only lukewarm, yet as she submerged me, it felt like liquid fire against my skin. My silent tears broke into a haunting wail, a release of the sheer emotional terror I had carried through the woods. By the next morning, I had a vocabulary I shouldn't have possessed at 4: hypothermia and frostbite. My nose, cheeks, and toes were mapped with the red, angry marks of the cold's teeth. I learned that day that I despised the winter, but the cold failed to do the one thing it tried its best to achieve. It never did kill my need to see what was over the next hill.